And we're live on the No Delusion Zone on Monday, June. I think it's, what is it, 22nd, June 22nd, 2026. And I'm here with my old friend, Jonathan Fink of Silicon Curtain. And we're going to talk about two main stories today, although we may divert to a couple of related things. But basically, of course, what's going on in England, in the UK, with the announcement yesterday by the Prime Minister, Starmer, that he's resigning.
Oh, that was
And
this morning. I mean, the rumors were yesterday, but his official
I'm sorry,
resignation
you're right.
came early this morning. Yeah.
I get up so early that my early was almost yesterday. I thought I saw it
Yeah.
yesterday, but
Well, the speculation was there. I mean, I think
yeah,
it was widely
yeah.
predicted
No, I
yesterday.
actually saw the live
So,
announcement, but again, since it was dark 30 here, that I just assumed it was yesterday. But in any event, for those of you watching, Starmer, Prime Minister Starmer, gave his announcement this morning, very, very early in the States, about his resignation. Andy Burnham, which we're going to talk about, it seems, is the likely replacement for Prime Minister. And we're also going to talk about what's going on in the war in Ukraine, but specifically the bombardment, thank God, of Moscow, what's going on there. So again, I'm thrilled to have my old friend Jonathan Fink back. So Jonathan, why don't
good to
you
be here.
start it off? Yeah, being the expert in all things UK and British, why don't we open it up with what's going on there with your current and former, future and former prime ministers?
It's funny because I don't really pay a huge amount of attention to domestic politics until it either rears its head like this, it's unavoidable, or where it overlaps with the main concern, which is going to be, geopolitics, and of course, primarily Ukraine and the support of Ukraine. So that's where I kind of intersect with British politics. But we can't ignore what's going on because it has such huge implications. So whereas Starmer domestically has been seen as weak potentially on a whole series of fronts, maybe not the kind of communicator that we needed at this point, maybe not built for social media and so on, but the press has really had it in for him for a long time in a way that his actual so-called failings or his actual actions don't really align with the sheer intensity of vitriol and actually hatred that's been thrown at him. I'm a little mystified as to why people took so far against him. I have a gripe that he is fairly weak as a leader, vacillating, doesn't seem to be able to make decisions necessarily quickly and decisively. But how's that different from some of the leaders we've had recently? In fact, we've had many prime ministers recently who are decisive in making all the wrong decisions and have caused absolute catastrophes. So, his qualities of sitting back, thinking, contemplating is not necessarily the worst. The sort of Hamlet of prime ministers, dare I say it, not wanting to take action, constantly philosophizing about stuff. There has been a gap between his rhetoric on many topics and his actions and so on. But it does seem that this has come to an absolute head. And I think we have to look at deeper politics. We're operating an electoral system which is an adversarial electoral system like the one you've got, which essentially is built on the idea that you have two parties, two sides slugging it out. But we have become a five-party society. And that has introduced an element of instability. That has
Jonathan, if you
introduced,
could, I was
yeah.
just introduced to that five-party system. Anybody who's not intimately aware of the political system in the UK doesn't know what that means. Could you just briefly explain what that means? You're into a
Yeah.
five-party system
Well, we
now,
have a
or
system called first past the post. So first past the post is a way of electing MPs. It means, the MP that wins the largest number of votes gets into Parliament. That doesn't mean that they have a majority of votes, and often they don't. And as you go from a two-party system to, for the last couple of decades, we've had a three-party system because we've had Liberal Democrats, we've had the Conservatives and Labour sort of vying it out. What you'll often have is that a constituents will be won, but the person who gets into Parliament won't have an overall majority. When it was three people slugging it out, that wasn't such an issue. When you come to Scotland and so on, you have the SNP, Scottish National Party, but the Conservatives weren't in the running in most. So you still ended up with a sort of three-horse race. So slightly different horses in Wales and Scotland. But the challenge here is that once you have more parties appearing. We now have the Greens, we have Reform slash Restore, which are these radical pop-up populist parties. Farage really started the trend for this sort of stuff. We also have, an extreme leftist party under Corbyn, etc. So you now have more and more parties vying for that vote. So when you have a candidate that wins, they're winning proportionally on a lower part of the vote. It's a smaller and smaller overall part of their constituency that is actually delivering that person to power. So I think what you're getting is a lot of people feeling, entirely discontent with what's going on. You have a party that won a huge majority, but if you break the numbers down, it's not such a large majority because a lot of people didn't vote for them, even though they've got more MPs by far than anyone else. So you're looking at a system that's starting to break down, become less representative, and in the age of social media, I think it's far less forgiving. Less forgiving of mistakes, less forgiving of people who aren't so media savvy. It's simply less analytical in any case. Plus, you do have a lot of money sloshing around. I don't want to say this is all Kremlin money because it's not, but you do have a lot more money sloshing around in the digital ecosystem vis-a-vis politics. You have a lot more potential politicians gaining funding from, let's say, undisclosed or shady sources, and the whole thing is becoming rather opaque and murky. That kind of that partly maybe explains the vitriol that has been directed at Starmer. The other part, of course, is that a lot of the mainstream media tends not to be centrist or leftist in its outlook, and one could say that with oligarchic ownership and with the inbuilt bias towards a sort of centre right and right wing point of view, that actually that also partly explains this enormous vitriol. But they've had the knives out for Starmer for some time now. This is
Why is
almost
that, Jonathan? Why is that, do you
well,
think?
this is actually difficult to explain. I could point to all sorts of foreign policy failings in the full awareness that actually foreign policy has nothing to do with why he's left. So my biggest gripes with him are not really the reasons he's gone. For good or ill, foreign policy issues don't decide elections here. Very much like in the US as well, I believe it's similar, although Iran may play a little stronger in that debate than otherwise would have. I know we're not going to go there, but essentially, people are going to vote based on domestic issues. And in the wake of Brexit, we have to ask the question, and this is going to be the thumbnail I'm going to give this when it goes to my audience: ungovernable question mark. Because since Brexit, it seems that we have an elephant in the room, which is that we have got progressively poorer, we have got progressively weaker. Now, our pro-Ukraine stance and the fact that Trump exists has perhaps built us back up a little bit, picked us up off the floor from where we were. But essentially, we are all in the shadow of Brexit, which was a deeply divisive vote, deeply damaging to our economy. And it's not just a one-off hit. This is going to become cumulatively more and more divisive. It's been estimated that the economy right now is 6 to 8% smaller than it otherwise would have been if we had not have left the European Union. Now, individual governments' policies can sway that, can increase or lower that, but 6 to 8%, that's huge. That's
And
unbelievable.
and I
That's
hear what
worse
you're
than the damage
saying.
Trump's done, right? Cumulatively,
Well,
that is actually
that
worse
that's
probably
that's
than
arguable.
the
That's
economic
arguable. But
damage.
but but I just want to pursue or follow up on some of the things you're saying, because that's what I have concluded and read, which is that regardless of who was your prime minister for the last 2 years, which is how long Starmer's been in office, that Britain was ungovernable, that no one was enough of a magician to hold all of the constituencies together to please everyone and become popular, that he was, whoever it was destined to become very, very unpopular, and for something like this to happen. What do you think about that thesis?
I think as long as our leaders are avoiding the elephant in the room, as long as they're not calling things out and trying to run what they call politics as normal, but what I call, the emperor's new clothes style policies, yeah, of course it's going to be called out until they say, unless we fix Brexit or at least find some way of making Brexit work with a real vision based on data analysis, reality rather than wishful thinking and feelings. Of course, they're going to continue to rub up against the absolute elephant in the room, which is that our economy is extremely sick. The other problem is, of course, with an anemic economy, you cannot fund all the things that need to be funded. You cannot fund welfare and health and infrastructure and defense. You cannot do it all. So here's the elephant in the room. Until our leaders are prepared to have a very honest conversation with the electorate to say, well, do you know what? We can't continue with this sort of feather-bedded benefits and welfare system when the actual security of the country is at stake, when we are potentially, not even potentially, when we are being attacked by Russia, when those attacks could potentially increase if the Russia threat isn't dealt with. Without actually naming that and dealing with it, I think we're going to have the same problems where politicians try to pretend that everything's normal, like the meme character sitting in the room on fire and saying, yeah, everything's fine. That's going to be the role of our politicians unless we have a leader who takes charge and says, do you know what? Things are not fine. Things are not normal. We
And
have to make
everything
radical changes.
and everything seems to come back to Brexit, doesn't it? Or a
It
lot of it.
does. A lot of it comes back to that. I mean, we had all sorts of issues, but I remember very clearly at the time we hosted the Olympic Games, there was this sort of a cultural, let's say, a communal and economic positivity here that essentially evaporated in the years since Brexit and turned to something extremely divisive. Ukraine as an issue has helped to heal some of those, at least bring people together to talk about something they can agree on. So I know many people who are watching this when they sit on the channel may actually be not quite so Euro Brexit skeptic as I am. But we can align on certain issues, which is that freedom, innovation, freedom of speech, Ukraine, healthy democracy, these kind of things matter. So there's been a little bit of a sticking plaster, I think, placed over the problem in Britain's strong stance and support of Ukraine. But that also has limits, and we're not supporting Ukraine to victory. We're not supporting Ukraine with a full recognition of the level of threat that we face. And we're not supporting Ukraine based on the understanding that Brexit has severely diminished our ability to supply more and do more. All of this is kind of being brushed under the carpet as sort of ostrich type behavior. And until these are all addressed and we have some that displays leadership characters, because I fundamentally believe that when people see leadership, they actually coalesce around it. This is one of the reasons why Starmer, I think, is gone. Even those who were inclined to support him have not seen the kind of vision or leadership. They just don't know what he's all about. They don't know how he's going to fix these problems, and they see he's not even prepared to really talk about those problems. So I think people will coalesce around leadership when they see it. The trouble is there is also false confidence, false leadership, which is what we have in Farage. It's the populist approach, the Trumpian approach as well, to say that actually these problems are all the fault of my predecessors, nothing to do with me, and I can fix them with a magic wand. Here we go. There's a real risk that people will align behind simplistic populist solutions. But I also think, ironically, it betrays the idea that they are actually looking for leadership. Will Burnham be that person? I mean, after the years we've been through, and we've been through more prime ministers than Italy, and that's historically that's saying
That's scary.
something. um, more than Italy during its one of its slightly flakier periods. That suggests that people are on the lookout for something and somebody that's going to fix these problems. I don't know if Burnham's that person. I'll wait and see.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. And he's not officially prime minister, although we all know
No.
that he probably will be. Most people, at least on this side of the Atlantic, haven't heard of him. I'm going to play a couple of brief clips that introduces him. If you'll just give us a moment, and then we'll each comment on the other side.
This man could change the face of UK politics.
Everyone knows that politics isn't working. Everyone can feel that the country isn't where it should be.
Andy Burnham's decisive victory in this by-election, the equivalent of a US special election, means he now has a seat in Parliament and could challenge the Prime Minister. Well, here's why this constituency of Makerfield in northwest England matters. It's one of a number of areas where the populist right-wing party Reform UK has been surging.
This way, please. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So Andy Burnham's victory here could serve as a blueprint for Labour going forward when it comes to fending off this populist threat.
But it is a chance now, from this result tonight, to build a new politics based on unity and hope, turning away from the path that takes us to a divided, dark politics of the kind we see in the United States.
And this second clip is even shorter, and it actually was just from a few hours ago, and it's self-explanatory.
Will you announce your intention to stand today?
I'm going to give him some space, please. Sorry, this is no more than your bargain for.
Are you preparing for a contest or a coronation?
And he really didn't make any comments. I understand when he got in the train there on the way to London, he pulled out his phone, and the first call he made was to Donald Trump, wishing to kiss his ass and, make good with him. I just made that up. But I hope that's
I was going to say, hang on a second.
I hope that's not
You're
what
being
he
cheeky
did.
here. It's definitely not what he did.
Is it is it me, or does he have a striking resemblance to old Starmer there in many, many ways? I'm sorry. He just doesn't seem like a radical different person, but he might be. We'll see.
I don't know. I mean, he has experience of governance. I think that's a little bit different there. I mean, it's been described that the current government is a bunch of student politicians. And that's not how I describe the Deputy Defense Secretary. And of course, it's really pointed that last week they both resigned. Having heard them both speak, I think they both understand the scale of the threat. And the comments they've made since are extremely pointed and critical. I think for the public, that won't have really made much of a dent on their opinions. But I think privately within the party, and let's face it, it's ultimately the party decides when to ditch a leader. And when they do it this rapidly, it's because they recognize there's a fundamental problem, that this guy cannot win a future election, and that he's going to get worse and worse, or at least the public frustration with this is going to get worse. So they've moved incredibly decisively. Burnham has come out and said that he is standing, and several people who might have been thought that they might also throw their hat into the ring have come behind him. So this is looking very much like a kind of swift internal decapitation of the leader, and change of horses to minimize the hassle. What they don't want to do necessarily, and this is going to be a real challenge, they've got a huge majority. Now they're going to be faced with a challenge. Do you get the guy in, let him sort of, bed in for a couple of months, and then call a snap election and hope that you reproduce your current result or even increase your majority, give him a mandate to carry on? Or do you not take that risk? Because what if he gets in and instead of a sort of honeymoon period, he has a tumultuous, disastrous couple of months, you call an election and it goes south? This is going to be a strategically very difficult call. The fact they've got a large majority perhaps suggests they might try to sort of bluff it through. That would only work if he has an incredibly powerful plan. clearly articulated, strong, and even, dare I say it, realistic plan. Now, he has been in governance. He's been mayor of Manchester, and by all accounts, that city has flourished in that period. That's kind of hands-on experience of governance that perhaps few actually in Parliament now have. So honestly, who knows? But he's certainly not. He's not sort of Tony Blair, and that he's not centre or even right of centre. He's much more in the mould of a more traditional left point of view. Not dare I say, I don't know, maybe it's comparable to Bernie Sanders. I have no idea, actually. I need to look into his politics. And of course, when people get in, their politics can be adapted to circumstances. But I think it's very important to note that he's going to have huge challenges, which he's going to need to articulate a clear position on. And to my mind, Brexit and defence of the realm, as they say, are two of the key ones. Because if he tries to sort of bluff it through and not really articulate a plan for those two, then yeah, we're in the same chaotic place that we were before.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, but the UK right now is in chaos. And if just what you said, unless he has a really solid plan, they could very well call a snap election. And then what happens? And as we're both discussing, I think personally, not being a Brit, that Brexit is the key to all of this. And unless that's dealt with head on, I think it's just going to continue to get worse. They keep nibbling away at it, and they've got new agreements now, as you know, with the EU for trade that they didn't have before, which basically says we blew it with Brexit. So let's try to get some of those agreements back again. The hell with that. Let's just cancel Brexit and go back to where we were before. And it's not where it was before, as you know, Jonathan, 10 years.
It cannot be where it was before.
No, well, not only that, but I mean, the threat from Russia now is real, as you said. It's not it's not even a threat. It's action. It's what's going on. The UK right now, the defense budget is terrible. The armed forces of Great Britain are not good. They need to be built up very fast and very strong. And with the current budget, that's not going to happen. Not to mention the National Health Service has got huge problems with it. You know more about that than I do.
There are issues, and this is where
you need a strong leader. You need a strong leader. You're right.
You also need money behind it, and
yes,
of course that's not going to come unless you fix the fundamental
But
issue.
that's a strong leader, because he needs, any strong leader of any country, you need to make the case to the public. And when you've got strong leaders that don't have a spine, that are afraid to do that, you're never going to come up with the money, because he's going to be afraid to ask for an increased budget, whether it's through taxes, reallocation of funds that already are there. It's not going to happen. So I hope for your sake and for the EU and NATO's sake, that he is a strong leader who has the spine and the guts to do that and come clean with the British people.
And of course, there are ways in which to join the European community or rejoin the market, and we have been surreptitiously following many of those rules still. So even though we wanted independence, the rules were bound by them. We have a lot more red tape. But I'm not sure, even amongst those who are extremely pro-European, as I am, I'm not sure there's an appetite to fully integrate at the deepest political levels. There isn't an appetite to have the euro as a currency. There isn't the appetite to surrender certain controls over certain things that could be defined as sovereign. So I think a clever politician is going to have to work their way through it, and probably not just say, here's a blank check, we're rejoining the EU, but we're going to rejoin, but on a way that makes sense to us. We're going to rejoin part of the market. That's going to place certain burden of costs on us, but actually look at the benefit, and they'll articulate that properly. I think this is actually going to be really important, because when Ukraine joins, Ukraine, I think, is going to be not a rule taker. When it joins the EU, it is going to fundamentally want to help reshape that organization in a way that's far less sluggish. Ukraine, if it's shown us anything in this war, is that the only way to survive in the world we're living in is to be extremely agile and not put up with bureaucracy, hierarchies, status, rules, bullshit for the sake of it.
Innovation. Yep.
You have to cut through all that stuff
Yep.
with a hot knife.
Yep.
We could take this as an opportunity to create a new tier within the EU of those that are in it, but are not looking to completely subsume their sovereignty. Because when you do so, I think you also surrender the ability to, to tackle the Japanese knotweed of rules and regulations and bureaucracy. You have to retain some independence to be able to critique it. And then there's the question of European army. Is Ukraine going to want to subsume the most powerful army in Europe into a European army? Goodness, no. Absolutely not.
The other way
That
around,
will
perhaps.
dilute it. So the other way around, possibly. I think equally Britain would find the idea problematic. So even though, as you say, we have lots of issues, we still do have a military tradition, some foundations there, especially with the special forces, that mean they would not want to assume that entirely and place it under European control. So I think
Jonathan,
the smart person is going to find a way through this.
We're gonna pivot in just a moment to Russia and what's going on over there. But before we do that, let me slide into that by asking you. We had both mentioned that the danger to England, to Great Britain right now from Russia is not hypothetical. It's for real. It's happening, and it's been happening. What right now are the greatest dangers that England faces from Russia? What has actually happened, and what's going on with vis-a-vis Russia versus Great Britain?
I mean, this is interesting, isn't it? So Starmer's resigned just a few days after it has basically been admitted by one of our courts that Russia managed or inspired terrorists, essentially, but this sort of outsourced Russian operation destroyed property and vehicles relating to our prime minister. In other circumstances, this would have caused a rally around the flag effect. In other circumstances, this would have been an extraordinary moment of news that our prime minister's property was targeted by a foreign power. It's barely made a dent. And this is deeply, deeply shocking. So I think whoever comes in, it will serve them well if they try to explain that this is not okay. And this is what it means, and this is what we're going to do about it. But I think the threat from Russia has never been highest. We have grey fleet confrontations in the Channel, which, if we continue to challenge them, and we must, will only increase. I think Russia actually wants a confrontation, a maritime confrontation. They're seeking it. I think we're going to get increasing levels of provocation, sabotage, arson, etc.
They just shot at a British yacht last week. What was that all about?
One could say that was just random, but actually they've been operating this grey fleet and they've been passing their ships through for the last 4 years. This is the first time they've shot, and it's no coincidence that it comes just a week or two after Royal Marines boarded a vessel. I think this is entirely intentional. It's a form of provocation that's designed to look, just outrageous or like a mistake on the ground, but it's absolutely not that. It's a clear and deliberate signal that we will continue to do this, and it's a form of extremely aggressive deterrence on their part. If this wasn't just a political stunt to board that one ship, if we're going to turn that into something that's systematic, and in order to not be weak, we absolutely must, then we're going to see many more of these provocations and confrontations. That's almost inevitable. And I think this is why we need a leader. A leader is someone who will balance the risk and not shy away when inevitably, as Russia will do, it punches and hurts, and it will do. So this is, if we appease it, then we're leaving the job entirely to Ukraine, the only country not afraid to do what's necessary. That brings us on to Moscow. That's exactly what Ukraine is doing. It's executing missions that the West should be more involved with. It is restricting Russia economically in a way that our sanctions ought to have had that effect, but didn't. We've essentially deferred all leadership in managing and containing Russia to Ukraine at an incredibly high cost. That seems extremely unfair.
Well, as Zelensky calls it, he is inflicting long-range sanctions on Russia with the drone attacks, the ballistic missile attacks, some of which may have been caused by their Flamingo ballistic missiles, but primarily drone attacks. Why don't you talk about, because I know you've done several podcasts and talked about this a lot, the most recent attacks, successful attacks by Ukraine on both Moscow and before that, St. Petersburg, and what effect that will probably have not only on the Russian psyche, but on their actual ability to supply their military with the needed oil and gasoline for their frontline troops.
Well, of course, the backdrop, the plumes of smoke in St. Petersburg are something that Putin would have seen because he actually went to that summit. I expect his aides would have underplayed that to an extent with him in terms of the messages, the information they're giving him. But at that same summit, we had Elvira Nabiullina, the central bank head, conspicuously absent. Well, she's reappeared. So it's clear he has some tensions and issues within the regime to deal with, in addition to Ukrainian long-range sanctions. And everyone's seen the videos. So I don't need to describe the videos, what happened in Moscow. It's now launched 1,000 memes. But I think there are things here which are not being discussed, which are rather interesting. One is Peskov admitted on the morning of the strike that Putin had not been informed, i.e. he's not plugged into a 24-hour news feed. He's not been given live updates. That suggests very much a bunker mentality, which is we only tell the Führer when the dust has settled and we can figure out how to spin the story so that he doesn't, lose his mind and have us all thrown out of windows. This really suggests that you have a managed reality that's being communicated to Putin. He's the only one who can end the war, frankly, and he's the only one who is ultimately culpable for the war. But he is not getting information from his minions, governors, and military that give him a rounded picture of what's going on or a picture of the fragility. It's highly likely that when they eventually told him, they're like, yes, well, this happened and it's not great. But the thing is, we're winning on all fronts. The thing is, we're taking it to the enemy and we're punching them far harder than they're punching us. So, yeah, some of these things will happen, but on balance, this is all good.
I'm going to go out on a limb here, Jonathan, and say that his inner circle is keeping the movie Downfall away from Putin at this point. What do you think?
I'm thinking that's not top on his list. I mean, like Stalin liked cowboy movies. Or the death of Stalin.
Well, he's living it right now. I mean, he literally is living the movie Downfall, which for those of you that don't know was I think based on, was it the last week or the last few days of Adolf Hitler? Yes. Yeah, in the bunker.
Führer bunker phase.
Yeah, Führer bunker. And
the other film he's definitely not watching is The Death of Stalin by Armando Iannucci.
Absolutely. That's another one they're keeping away from him. But yeah, I'm sure they're telling him, nothing to see here. Nothing to see. Yeah, everything's just going great. Have some more borscht.
Peachy.
It's
all peachy.
It's all peachy. We're winning. We're winning. Just keep that in mind. And it's all NATO's fault. So what else?
Yeah, exactly. And they'll also be holding out the idea that, okay, we're not controlling Trump in quite the way we thought. But actually, dare I say, in Iran, I suspect they are. We weren't even going to go there, but I feel that Putin is also looking not just at the local scene, he's looking globally. And they'll be trying to package up everything for him. Look at this. The US is tied down in Iran. They're losing. Our ally Iran, with our support, has humiliated the US. They're going to be packaging up little good news stories from their perspective as to why, on the big picture, Russia is changing the world, etc., etc. This means that when the collapse happens, it becomes quite a shock and a surprise to Putin. because he will not have been told what we are now seeing in plain sight, all the different routes that are leading towards that. We're now seeing petrol completely banned for sale on Crimea for
Yes.
civilians.
Yeah.
We're seeing the main highway through Zaporizhia interdicted for logistics and fuel transport entirely. And this is interesting to speak to the right people at this. It seems that long-range strike and relatively short-range strike has been the big focus. It's only with Fedorov who's come in, and now obviously, you know, he's gone on top of his brief. He's launched a whole range of stuff. He got Starlink switched off. It seems in the last couple of weeks, him and his team have turned their attention to middle strike. And it is the significant upscaling in commissioning of middle strike drones, which is interesting because it suggests this technology already existed, but wasn't being utilized, wasn't aligned with necessarily a military strategy.
It wasn't their strategy at the time. Yeah, they've
wasn't
changed.
Strategy.
Yeah,
they've
which is
changed,
brilliant.
and middle strike is now a huge focus.
Yes.
It suggests to me, and I'm going to try and get Ben on at some point, it suggests to me that this is now more clearly aligned with a strategy of victory, a theory of victory. Now, however long that takes to unfold, we're starting to see the outlines of it. And the outlines of it are the interdiction of fuel supplies on Crimea to turn it into an island. They've been blowing bridges, transport links, which essentially is an extraordinary shaping operation to make the island untenable. And also Moscow, of course, is being deprived of fuel. Hey,
one of your agents, no doubt.
You're live there. Keep your head down.
Yeah, one of your apparatchiks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, let me
Moscow being
Crimea.
denied of fuel is part of that. Now, that's going to take a lot longer to, I would say, have a real impact. You know, what you're seeing at the moment with people complaining, etc., etc., they will probably restore supply to an extent, which means a lot more strikes like we've seen are going to be required to actually have a serious logistical impact on the capital.
As you know, Ben Hodges, our mutual friend, has said from the very, very beginning that Crimea is the key to liberating Ukraine and to having Putin withdraw eventually, excuse me, from Ukraine. And one of the telling things I saw, it may sound silly, not only is gasoline now not banned, but there's no petrol on Crimea for anything but emergency and military vehicles. More importantly, children now cannot go to summer camp. All summer camp in Crimea has been canceled because of the attacks, and that's going to piss off all the Russian mothers who now have to stay home with their kids. And so that may have a bigger effect than no petrol for their cars. But you're right. The Ukrainians have actually, it's been a strategy, as you know, for years since the war began, to isolate the Russian forces on Crimea and to cut them off from any resupply and to make them feel very, very vulnerable. You know, it started with chasing the Russian Navy out of the Black Sea. Then it started on the pinpoint strikes on their anti-aircraft or anti-air facilities and their military bases. Now with the attacks on the bridges and the gas and fuel facilities, they are in fact doing that. They're isolating Crimea from the mainland, and Ukrainians, are using psychological warfare against not only the Russian military, but the Russian civilians who have been transported or moved to Crimea after the full-scale invasion from 2014.
And I think people have to watch some of the videos there. Now, they're not necessarily representative of everyone, but the voices kind of ring true. And this is people talking about how they're packing their cars up and they're leaving, and some are crying about the lovely lifestyle they're leaving behind. But what also comes through in those videos is, one, zero care for any idea of sovereignty or which population they displaced in order to take those apartments and those lives. There's literally zero care. It doesn't even enter the radar.
They can't go to the beach anymore, and they're upset.
They can't go to the beach. Our whatever careers we had are being restricted. I think many of them would probably have been working remotely anyway for companies in mainland Russia. So it's just a lovely, lovely lifestyle. And the only reason they're leaving is because they can't fuel their vehicles and their lifestyles have become an inconvenience.
Yep.
That's it. I mean, it's the same with people, and this, I find this remarkable. The same with people who are, there was a video of a lady in Moscow, who'd, and this also tells you what the Russian state's been doing. They've been subsidizing children's camps. So it's like, you go to Crimea, you can get, a hotel room with half-price food and discounted rates. All you have to do is rock up, and your children's holiday camp is free. So we'll get the kids off your hands, etc. The state has subsidized the colonization
The
of
occupation.
Crimea,
Yeah.
the occupation, in a very modern sense. And you just have to look at the opposite of this. This person is about to fill their car, stuff their children in it, drive down a route where you have burning lorries and trucks every few meters. She's prepared to do that to get a cheaper holiday. And she's on the video saying she'd already spent money on what she called vkusnyushki. She'd already spent money on little snacks and nibbles. She's not seemingly concerned that she's taking her children into a route which has become a war zone, into somewhere where an ethnic genocide has been committed, and living in properties that once belonged to other people. None of that registers. It's just the inconvenience that it's caused.
And
And
as
then
you
they
said,
all ask, why is this happening to us? Why
well,
is
I was
this
going to say,
happening to me?
people should watch some of the videos about this, not only what's happening in Crimea, but the bombings, the drone attacks and ballistic missile attacks on Moscow and St. Petersburg, and some of the videos about the Russians who posted some videos about how they're inconvenienced. It's echoing exactly what you're saying. I have yet to hear any of them, and I've watched a lot, say that this is horrible. When are we going to stop this war? Or, if this is a result of blah, blah, blah. I know they'd be arrested probably. I get all of that. But it really comes out loud and clear, Jonathan, that they're just pissed. They're angry because they're inconvenienced. Several women said they can't go to the salon today because it's closed, or they're tired of breathing all of the smoke from the burning refineries and all of that. And they can't wear their clothes that they want.
And the phrase comes up. I don't think they're saying this just for the cameras or for the regime. They say, why is this happening to us? What have we ever done? What have we ever done to hurt anybody?
Yeah. Why are they doing that to us? So it just it makes your blood boil. Mine anyway.
I mean, one person who came on the channel, I think, called this for what it is entirely intentional, but it's extreme infantilization. It's not brainwashing anymore, and it's not even just denying people their agency, their political agency. It's an extreme infantilization, which means that people have no understanding of political cause and effect. They just have no conception of the world in political terms, or the idea that if their state does things in their name, that concerns them in any way. They can feel proud, and they can take all sorts of benefits from being associated with the state. They can take vicarious pleasure in being part of a strong state that can hurt people and steal its shit. But when the consequences come, there's no connection there. I think genuinely they're simply bewildered and perplexed.
Well, it's been going on for so long now, the war, I mean, not just the war, from 2014, which most people forget, but the full-scale invasion has been going on so long. The brainwashing and the attribution against those who protested have been going on so long that, in my opinion, the Russian people, for the most part, have bought into what's going on, into the Kremlin's propaganda. That goes beyond brainwashing, like what you're talking about. It's not that they're just brainwashed. They've bought into it. They really don't understand, or don't want to understand. They won't let themselves understand that, hey, this is just a very, very small dose of what Ukrainians go through every day and every night for years and worse. That doesn't enter their brain. They're just inconvenienced for whatever reason, because they've bought into that they are, superior, and they deserve to take any retribution or attacks on the Ukrainians, because they deserve it. How dare they defend their country? They don't have a country, and on and on and on.
And on it goes.
It's disgusting.
it's just this extreme. I know this word is used a lot, but it's entitlement. It's extreme entitlement,
Yeah.
but with no sense whatsoever of there being consequences or personal responsibility of any kind. And the question arises, and this is a question for the West, not for Ukraine, because the Ukrainians understand this implicitly. It's a question for the West. If you are proposing somehow negotiations, if you are proposing some kind of relationship with Russia in the future, if you're proposing to tie Ukraine's hands and prevent them from having a victory, then what is your theory of how to deal with a population that are so callous in some ways, that are so completely, disenfranchised, so completely broken with reality that they would support anything really
Psychopathic.
done in their name. Yeah, what do you do with that population? You can't just say, "Oh, there are good Russians and democracy will triumph," and hope for rainbows, pixies, and unicorns,
Yeah.
which essentially is the Western position. You have to
Yeah.
engage with the reality of how broken that society
And
fundamentally is.
I've addressed that a lot. And I, of course, don't have all the answers. I'm not smart enough, but I have said that they need to do exactly what you're saying. And my small contribution has been it's a systemic problem, and it's been that way for hundreds of years. The West eventually has to break that system. I don't mean massive detention or re-education. That could come later in terms of, doing away with the system, but they have to break the system. They can't allow the current system to exist. They can't just say, okay, Russia, you're bad. You lost. You have to pay this much in retributions. But other than that, just do what you're doing, bye-bye. No. We, the West, has to hit this head on, Jonathan. They have to do something and not allow the Russian system as it is and as it's been going on for almost 800 years to continue, because we'll just have more wars like this. The mentality that is ingrained in the Russian DNA, the superiority you're talking about, that's got to go away. It's just
It'll
got to go away.
It'll
And
repeat, rinse and repeat if
yes,
it's not dealt with.
So a very big break needs to happen. Like I said, I don't have all the answers. All I know, it's got to be, how can I say, like a denazification. And I know Putin is saying that about Ukraine. I mean reality. After the end of World War II, there was a huge program to denazify Germany because they had the real Nazis, and it took generations. You know this. It took, minimum, they think, 20 years, if not more, decades, to actually denazify Germany to the point where they could start to rebuild it in some kind of a normal democratic image. It's going to take far longer, in my opinion, to do the same thing in Russia. But if they never start, it's never going to happen.
And of course, Germany had the benefit. One, it had sort of foresight along with the Allies, who also had the foresight in how to rebuild it, and build it along the lines of, the famous German Mittelstand, which is, smaller towns, mid-sized towns, local industry, local accountability, not having just large oligarchic super entities.
Well, Germany had a framework and a history, like you're saying, to build on. Russia has no history, no democratic history, nothing even remotely normal or similar to Europe to build on.
It had local, regional, and identities that you could actually, use as a foundation for that construction. Originally, one of the American generals proposed that actually Germany be turned into just a rural, just literally deconstruct all the cities and industry and turn them back to being a rural population. That was decided that is neither fair nor reasonable. Nor at that point, as the Soviet Union became more powerful, desirable. But with Russia, we have to sort of answer that question. How are you going to build that local identity, that extremely fragmented, decentralized identity, unless it's under some form of occupation?
And therein lies the problem.
Yeah. There's no likelihood of that.
There's no easy answer, but I'll say it again. Unless that is started, that process begins, it will never change. You just said rinse and repeat. We're going, as a world, we're going to be looking at this for forever. Until that happens, what's going on in Ukraine, the threat to Europe, the rest of the world is going to repeat itself. And I guess unless they're prepared to do this every few years, they need to attack this head on right now. I mean, the actual obliteration of the current Russian regime and way of government, and start all over again, literally from the ground up. Raze, R-A-Z-E, the government and institutions of Russia, and start all over.
I mean, in terms of institutions, it really has none. I think that can move forward.
No.
And those that had some civic role, you know, have been crushed and banned and distorted, and you know, various agents of the regime placed inside them. So no, it really has to be a re-architecting from the ground up. I do not see that coming from the official from the self-designated Russian opposition.
No,
but yeah,
and that's another disappointment for another show, which is the Russian diaspora and loyal opposition that now live in Europe. Another story, another episode. I think we're running out of time. I really enjoyed talking to you folks. I haven't sat down with Jonathan for quite a while, and you know, he's off doing his own thing on YouTube and various other ventures. But I'm glad to have him back here on the No Delusion Zone. And you're going to be posting this also on Silicon Curtain, you said, correct?
I certainly am. So people will be seeing this on my channel. Once I've been able to sort of rip it, that'll probably be tomorrow, because it takes a while for YouTube to allow you to sort of rip those live streams. But yeah, I'll post it. And
one comment we had here, and I'm kind of confused. He's asking, where am I streaming this to? Well, he's watching it on YouTube. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that I'm streaming it to YouTube. But that's just a guess. Other than that, you're also going to be able, as Jonathan just said, to watch it on Silicon Curtain, which at last count, I think was it 517 million subscribers. So
that would be nice. Yeah,
definitely
nice.
Be able to watch it there. Other than that, I'm going to have to say adieu to my friend Jonathan until next time. I'm thankful for everyone who has watched this live. Most folks will watch the recording, no doubt, here and on the Silicon Curtain. And Jonathan, I'm going to ask you to make a promise to come back here soon.
Absolutely. Well, there's no shortage of things to talk about, and I always have great pleasure from these discussions.
No. So we're going to call the end to this live stream. And again, thank you all. Please, before you leave, hit a like and subscribe to the No Delusion Zone. And then we'll see you next time. We're here tomorrow with me, and very soon, hopefully, with Jonathan again. So until then, take care, stay safe, and stay sane.